Hi, I'm Michael Oldham, founder of PortSys. Today I'm going to take you through an introduction of our product Total Access Control. Total Access Control, or TAC as we call it, is a secure reverse proxy that helps organizations easily make a migration from today's current architecture to a modern architecture based on a zero trust philosophy. It is simple, easy to use for your end users, but it's also very easy to use for the administrators who are setting it up and making things work. Today we're going to take a quick overview that's going to highlight the product, show you a bit about that, and then we're going to take a deeper dive into the technologies and give you a much more robust understanding of what Total Access Control's capabilities are. Okay, so let's move on to the highlights. We're going to show a quick overview of what Total Access Control is all about, what it does, and how it works. So I'm going to log on over here, and before I start to do the log on, I'm going to bring up my mobile phone screen, which is going to pop up onto the screen here so you can see the process. In this case, for the multi-factor authentication, which is push notification. TAC includes push notification as a default part of the product, along with multiple other kinds of multi-factor authentications. So when I go to log in, I put my credentials into the portal, and this portal is highly dynamic. It's completely modifiable. You can change the logos, change the colors, change the pictures, etc., to make it a personalized experience for your organization. Once you log into the credentials, in this case, push notification comes across, and it's going to show up on my phone, and my phone's going to bring up the push notification here. And the push notification is going to check my phone's password. In this case, I've got it for face recognition. I approve this. And then on the portal, I now get access to all of the information, the applications that I have set up. And what happens behind the scenes as this is going on is my context of access is being checked, looking at my device, where I'm coming in from, looking at the status of my security position of my device. All of those things are being checked behind the scenes and then being brought up so that you can actually see what applications I qualify for under my current circumstance. We're using in this case, we're using Active Directory, but we can use many different types of credentials, whatever types of credentials that you have, whether that's Active Directory or something else. It can use cloud-based, whether that's Azure or Okta or other kinds of technologies. But we also combine those with all kinds of different factors of authentication, not just multi-factor authentication, which we fully support. As you saw with push notification, we also include SMS, one-time password, etc. We include a number of different kinds, and we can get more into that, into the more in-depth conversation further on in the demonstration. But these applications that come up are really designed for to only show the applications that I qualify for under the current circumstance. So when I take a look at these applications, for example, if I go into Mail, it will bring up my, in this case, Outlook Mail straight away in another tab. And if I wanted to go into other applications as well, I could certainly bring those other applications up, including things that may be like a Linux box, SSH, or something like that I want to bring up. And that will bring it up into my portal in another tab. So as I'm working, I have multiple different applications that could be up at the same time. But the only applications that are going to be shown here are the ones that I qualify for under my current security circumstance. This portal is completely dynamic. And it's based on the policies. What shows up on the portal is based on the policies that you have set up for each resource. One of the things that we do that's a little bit different is we look at the world resource by resource. And it's not just taking the resource. So each resource has its own potential for having different policies. Because under different circumstances, some resources you may or may not want to have different security policies for. So for example, if I had something that was sophisticated from an engineering perspective and I didn't want that to be accessed from outside the organization, I could set up a policy that says that can only be accessed from inside my secure network and not from anywhere else. But there may be a lot of other applications that I might want to be able to provide remote access to. So Total Access Control does this all dynamically based on the security policies that you've set up within your organization. So it works with all types of browsers, any modern browser it will work with. It works and scales across any environment from smaller usages up to hundreds of thousands of users across the entire world. It can run in the local data center, it can run in the cloud data center that you have, or it can be spanned across that in an array that will work across the entire globe if that's what you're looking to do, if you want to scale to that size. And ultimately what we're doing is that total access control is being brought in to help the organization to get control over access to the resources. It's a secure reverse proxy. So the first thing that the users are going to find is the portal access from total access control. It's going to provide the authorization checks before you get access to all of those different applications. And it's going to look at the device that you're on, it's going to look at the security status of that device, and make a determination of the different resources you're going to get access to. It's really designed to bring those applications up very quickly, make it easy for people to be able to bring everything into one place. So whether you have Citrix, whether you have something like SSH, whether you have something like Office 365 for cloud apps, etc., Total Access Control brings them all into one place and creates a common set of security requirements for all of those different applications. So you can have the same multi-factor authentication that you want to use across the board. But there are other times that you may want to have something that's a little bit more secure, and you may want to add something else. So for example, in this case, for SharePoint, we're adding an additional, this is one of our other multi-factor authentications called Safe Login, a picture-based multi-factor authentication. And that can be added in front of an individual application. It will then bring up that application based on the security and the fact that you had the right password to get into it. So there's lots of different ways to set up the site to be able to allow you to properly and more securely bring up your applications. So it's very easy from an end user's perspective. But the other thing that it's doing, all of these transactions, everything that you're seeing is happening across port 443. So for things like remote desktops or other kinds of sessions, you can bring up a remote desktop. If in this case it's a full remote desktop that we're looking at, you can bring up that full remote desktop and it's still happening across port 443. So you do not have to go out and expose your, in this case, port 3389 to the outside world. This actually brings up the entire desktop through port 443. And so you're not exposing your organization to the outside world and the security threats that could be out there for people doing things like Goldbrute or others that are out there that they're attacking, for example, RDP. So you don't have to actually go out and expose your organization to those threats. You can close down your ports and really tightly secure the organization. One of the things that it also allows you to do is bring all of your access into one place. And so what happens is you now have a place to have centralized reporting, logging, and auditing of all the access that's happening to your organization, whether it's for local or cloud-based resources, wherever they happen to be. And Total Access Control works with all of the resources that you have, whether they're cloud applications, whether they're IoT, SSH, remote desktops, or virtual desktop infrastructure. All of those things, even legacy applications that may not have a classical web-based interface, all of those applications can work within the same portal. So for example, we'll look at WordPress. WordPress could be an example of one of your legacy applications. It goes into WordPress automatically with single sign-on to those resources. And it can do that for legacy applications, client-server applications like we saw with the Citrix, or any kind of application that you have within your organization. So this allows an organization to move and create segmentation of resources because each session is going to only allow the user to be able to get access to those individual resources that they are authorized to get access to. And the important part about that is what it does is it only allows them to that resource, that individual resource, and it doesn't give them complete network access. So one of the challenges with VPNs that we have in the world is that a VPN will drop somebody onto a local network, or that user who walks in with their current laptop and they plug into the local network and they get direct access into the network and then can, if it's a malicious actor, whether it's through VPN or the local network, they can then pivot and attack other resources, which is one of the reasons that we see so many problems today and so many security vulnerabilities is that people are getting inside the organization. Once they get past that outside hard perimeter, they're on the soft and gooey middle of your network, and that's when they can pivot and attack, exfiltrate data, do ransomware attacks, and other kinds of malicious activities. So total access control is designed to bring all of those together into one central control that makes it easier from the administration perspective to have a much stronger security paradigm, and then also allow you to make it easier for your end users at the same time. So let's talk a little bit more about the architecture of total access control and how it's set up, how it's designed. So total access control is a secure reverse proxy. And that means that total access control is going to be the first and the strongest line of defense before you can get access to anything else that's happening within your organization. The capabilities to close the ports to the outside world are very strong with total access control because you can close those ports. You don't have to have those open. The only port you really will end up having open is port 443. Everything that's happening across the sessions with total access control is going to be fully encrypted. So it's going to be TLS encrypted across from the end user to total access control and then to the resources that'll happen behind the scenes. But rather than going out and opening up ports like we do today for VPNs, or we open up ports for things like RDP or others, you don't have to open those ports up anymore from an architectural perspective because TAC is going to take care of that. And basically, once a user makes the connection across through total access control and has been properly authenticated and authorized to be able to get access to those resources, I'll use RDP for an example, they won't be able to get access to RDP until they're fully vetted through the authentication, multi-factor, device validation, all sorts of things that TAC can do. It then brings you into and makes the translation to that port on the inside of your infrastructure rather than doing that directly to a port that's connected to the outside world where hackers can scan and get access to and try to throw different attacks against it. So it's very important. And one of the other things that's really important about total access control is it's designed to be easy to implement in your existing infrastructure. And what's really important about that is that you don't want to have to rebuild your entire infrastructure just to try to make a move to a zero trust environment. You don't have to. There are lots of technologies out there that will say that you do, that you have to put in a new authentication system or move everything to the cloud or do a number of other things, but you don't. It's because their technologies are designed that way. Total access control is designed to work with your technology where it exists today. So rather than going and having you put in a whole new authentication, let's say that you had Active Directory, you don't need to go out and create another version of that in the cloud. You can use what you already have, or if it's not Active Directory, whatever it is, total access control will work with the infrastructure you already have in place. In addition to that, what will happen is total access control is going to bring a central control point for all of your resources and all of your applications. So you'll have one common place to be able to manage. It's designed to bring in all of your applications and resources, whether those are locally based, whether they're cloud-based, et cetera, into one place. And it's very easy to work with those applications. You do not have to rewrite your applications to work with total access control. TAC will work right off the bat with your applications the way that they are already set up in your infrastructure. What this means is that for most organizations, change takes time. And change is one of the challenges that organizations have to face when they're looking at making a change to a new technology and trying to move to something like a zero trust philosophy. Total access control allows you to be able to move clearly from your existing infrastructure in stages that work for your organization and at the pace of change that your organization can manage. It is not a rip and replace solution. It's one that goes in parallel with everything you're doing today and is easy to deploy alongside of all your other technologies. In fact, TAC works very well with other technologies that exist inside of your infrastructure. So if you have other security technologies, et cetera, TAC will work with those technologies or as an overlay, a security overlay for those other technologies. So you may have technologies in place that are going to be harder to move or change or that you want to keep over time. TAC will work well with all of those technologies. And so you're going to have a solution that's going to work with all of your modern browsers, everything that you're doing in your organization, and can be accessed from mobile devices, from laptops, desktops, Chromebooks, whatever you have. And there's lots more functionality that's built into that from an architecture perspective. TAC is designed as a virtual appliance, and we did this deliberately. We wanted organizations to be able to retain full control over their environment. It's not a multi-tenant solution. It's not a solution that you're in with a bunch of other people. From a security perspective, we like to have that and want our customers to have that complete control over their own environment. So you have the control. It can be run in a local data center. It can be run in a cloud data center, wherever you want it, AWS, Azure, et cetera. So it can work in the cloud. Or it can be hybrid across the two. So if you want to have disaster recovery, et cetera, you can architect TAC to be able to work with that. And it's deployed in an array. And with TAC, we don't charge you extra for things like bandwidth or connections or throughput or any of those things. It's based on users. So a user is the way that we do our licensing. It's by user. And a user may have multiple different devices. It still will count as a single user. Our pricing and everything that goes along with that is designed to be very straightforward and simple. We can get to that conversation if that happens down the line. But ultimately, from a security perspective, the architecture is designed to scale to whatever size that you need. Each virtual machine can be modified very simply on your end to increase the amount of RAM and CPU, to increase any performance needs for an individual machine in an array. And then you can have multiple different devices that are concatenated into a larger array. And you can even concatenate multiple arrays together if you wanted to have something like a global array in multiple data centers around the world. So all of that's possible. It's completely scalable and can grow to the size of your organization. And you have control over the performance. It's not a hardware device or something that you have to purchase extra to be able to get more throughput. TAC comes completely ready to be able to do that. So it's designed to be able to allow you to be able to scale quickly and easily. And it has the capability to do as many users and have the performance in your hands versus someone else. So let's talk a little bit more about the user experience. The user experience is designed to be very easy to use for the user. So the end user basically comes in, they type in the portal address. It's just a simple URL for the portal address that you're going to be coming in on. Once they come to the portal, they're going to be prompted for authentication. And this can be very varied depending on the way that your organization wants to do the authentication. And I'm also going to bring up my mobile phone over here to show you the experience on what it looks like from a product perspective. So I'm going to sign in with these Active Directory credentials, and it's going to tell me that a push notification has been sent across. So on my mobile device, I'm going to tap that. I have face recognition on it, so it's already approved my face. And now I'm going to hit the approve button on the bottom, and that's going to allow me to be able to get straight into the portal. So from a usability perspective, with multi-factor authentication, this is basically validating that I have a correct device, because that's only tied to this device that I have my personal, in this case, personal phone. It's the only thing that I've got that's set up that will work with this for multi-factor authentication. Now, I can do that with one-time password as well. So if for some reason I'm offline, it will default and give you the capability to do one-time password. But we also have things like SMS. We have FIDO2. We have a number of different kinds of multi-factor authentications that are built into Total Access Control. To make it as easy and straightforward as possible for the end users to be able to get in, but to be able to do that securely. Multi-factor authentication is one of the great ways to be able to help organizations to maintain a higher level of security. But even more than that, Total Access Control is looking at the policies for all of the resources that we have. So there are a number of different resources that are in this portal that we can look at. And each of these, when you click on that resource, it'll open in a separate tab. In this case, I'm going to Outlook. Not a lot in this demo lab, but this would be the Outlook the interface. And that tab will stay there. If I go back to the portal and I want to do something like go into SharePoint, I can do that as well. And in this case with SharePoint, I'm going to go into this safe login, again, another multi-factor, because this is a higher level of security. I want to make sure that this application is more secure. So I've put that in. Once I submit that, it will then allow me into, in this case, SharePoint. And there are lots of different ways from a usability perspective, but with single sign-on to all of these resources, it really makes it easy for the end user to be able to get in. The other thing that happens, and I'll show you a demonstration here, is that total access control is very dynamic from a security perspective. So I'm looking at, and these policies are dependent, what I see here is dependent on the security policies that I have in place. TAC is completely dynamic, and what I'm going to show you is that right now I'm going to turn off my firewall. And I'm going to turn that off, and what's going to happen is within a few seconds, if you've noticed, a number of icons went gray. That means that I no longer get access to those because my workstation in this case doesn't meet the security policies that were in effect before. And this would actually take me out of those different resources and not allow me access to those different resources once that policy was taken into effect. So if I go and put that back on, very quickly, if I enable that firewall back, within a few seconds, what you'll see is those will become available to me again. So from a user perspective, the user doesn't really have to know what they have to do. They don't have to do anything in particular. If they're coming in from an untrusted machine, if they're coming in from a mobile device, if they're coming in from a jailbroken iPad or something like that, the experience for the end user is still going to be the same from the way that they get access. They're going to go to the URL, and they're going to only be allowed access to the things that they qualify for under the security policies. But what's happening is the context of access when somebody's logging on in the very first bits of the experience are all being done behind the scenes. So from an end user's perspective, even though a lot of context is being determined about that endpoint, the end user has just a very simple, straightforward experience where they can get access to all of their different resources quite easily. And so with that, with single sign-on, with the dynamic portal, it makes the experience very easy for the end user, whether they're coming in from a laptop, whether they're coming in from a mobile device, or other types of devices. Let's talk a little bit about application publishing. So application publishing is the way that you put your resources and make them available to the end users through the portal, or if you chose not to use a portal, you could have those resources be accessible directly to the end user. So for example, they don't have to go through the step of a portal if they only had one resource that was available, say to a third-party contractor or something like that. But the interface that I'm showing here is the way that you would go through and add those resources. And the way that you can add the resources is very straightforward. It's one place to add all of the resources for your applications and file resources, et cetera, in a single location. So whether that's a web-based application, whether that's a cloud application, whether it's a client-server application, or whether it's something like a browser-embedded application, remote desktop or VDI of some sort, all of those can be added right here in the portal. So if you're going to add an application, you can simply go in and publish it through here. And there are many different settings. So if I wanted to go through and create something like I want to do Outlook Anywhere, I could put that in. I could publish Outlook Anywhere. I could put the application name in and then process through. So and then it would say, do I have a single application or a farm of servers behind? Let's say it's single. I can then go through and put in the address and put in the ports that I want to publish it through. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility within this, and it also goes into details about the security. So let me bring up one of the other applications, for example, Office 365, also available in the same place. So if you wanted to take a look at something like Office 365, this is already set up. It shows me the details about how I'm doing single sign-on to that application. There are a number of different ways that you can do that depending on the particulars for the application. It provides the capability for determining what users I want to use. And this could be, in this case, this is Active Directory, so it's connecting with Active Directory, and I can do it through different user groups within Active Directory, et cetera. Or I can even go all the way down to individual users that could be specific for this policy, which is very granular from that perspective. And I can also go through, and we'll talk about this in the next section, really about access policies, where I can go in and I could have a policy that said, it requires antivirus to be able to access this. So I have to have a live running current antivirus to be able to activate this particular or qualify for this particular application and be able to do that. And I can also change the look and feel of what the icons are, et cetera, on the portal to make it look the way that you want it to. So it's a very straightforward, simple process for publishing applications, but what it does is it gives you the capability to have all of your applications and resources in one single place. That makes it very easy for your end users, and also very easy from an administration perspective, because you only have one place that you have to go to. And so instead of having multiple different tools, some for cloud-based applications, some for local applications, or just allowing people to get access straight to the network to be able to get access to whatever they want, this gives you the capability to publish those resources in a way that makes it straightforward, highly secure, and simple for everybody. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the security policy engine. The security policy engine, which is accessible here through Total Access Control, allows you to use Boolean logic to define the security policies that your portal is going to use. These policies can be applied against any of your applications. And all of the rich information that's able to be gathered from the context of access of an end user's device is eligible to be in a policy engine. So you can actually create policies based on things like a registry key entry, for example, or whether the antivirus is running or the firewall is running. There are a number of different things that you can look at about that end user, about their current context of access, the device that they're on, the operating system they're using, the patch level. One of the challenges that many organizations have today is trying to manage all of these different devices that exist out there. And the challenge with that is that if you have too many devices and you're trying to manage too many different scenarios, it's very difficult for most organizations just to keep up with all of that. And so our view is we create security policies that will allow the organization to determine at the time of access who gets access to that information and under what current circumstances. And this is really important because a person who is on, let's say that you're on your managed corporate laptop and you sign into your organization, and you're inside the company's four walls, and you get access to, let's say, some sensitive information. That should be fine, right? You normally get access to that. But what if you take that same managed corporate device, you pick it up, and you walk out with your same credentials, you go to the local coffee shop around the corner, and you get access from there? Should you still get the same level of access to that sensitive information? Some corporations may say no, that they don't want to provide that same level of access if you're not in the local office. If you're not sitting at your desk, you don't get access to that information. But for many organizations, if you have the same managed device and the same credentials, then you're going to get access regardless of where you are. So context of access is really important. And these policies, these access policies that you can create, will help you to be able to do that. And access policies can be written in very detailed level if you choose to do this. This one just happens to be, do you have an antivirus, and is it current? Is it a current active antivirus? So with these kinds of things that you have, it actually creates the capability to design a number of different security policies that you can then apply to your applications. And each of those applications can have their own security policies that will go along with those. It can be done at both the site level, so the entire portal, or it can be done on individual applications. And that makes the policy engine very detailed and comprehensive to help you to be able to create the restrictions that you want about each and every different resource that you have. So let's talk a little bit about TAC's capability around virtual desktop infrastructure, or in this case, we'll use RDP as an example, remote desktops. So remote desktops are something that can be very powerful, and it's not just remote desktops themselves. Lots of organizations use those, but it's also about remote apps, and we'll talk about the difference between those two and what Total Access Control allows you to be able to do. So when I take a look at a remote desktop, as I start looking at this, I have a couple of different ways to be able to publish the remote desktop. The first way is the traditional way that most people will have. And remember, before I even get access to this, I've gone through a security check for my credentials, my multi-factor authentication, my device, my entire context of access before I even see that this is available. So it's really important that we look at that first, because you can't get access to RDP unless you meet all of those different security restrictions. So once I've met that, total access control will take, and again, this is happening across port 443, not port 3389 or any other port. It's done fully encrypted, and before you actually get access to RDP, which is now protected on the inside of the infrastructure, you have to go through total access control and its protection first. Once that user's been authenticated, you now get access to, for example, this is a full RDP desktop. So now I have a full desktop that I can get access to, just as if I was using it as a direct connection to RDP. But now I don't have to publish port 3389 to the outside world. So I'm going to just close this one down and disconnect from this session. But the other thing we can do is we can actually publish this through HTML5. So this is the same desktop that I'm going to be connecting to, but instead of going through the native client where you have to load the native client, I'm going to be doing this completely clientless. And this becomes really important. Let's say that you wanted to provide RDP access to a device that wasn't a Windows-based device. Well, you can still do that. You can do it to a mobile device, to an iPad, to a laptop, or even a Google Chromebook. Any of those devices are now capable to be able to get access to the full desktop. And you can do whatever you need to do at that full desktop, which is very important. And it gives you flexibility within your organization. And this is still all done within the security paradigm that you've created for being able to access that in the first place. So let's talk a little bit more about RDP app, because RDP app is another way to be able to provide access to information in a way that's very simple and easy to publish, and allows you to be able to do things and securely publish resources and applications to devices that you may not have control over. So for example, I could go in, and this is not a great application, but I would publish the calculator. So this calculator exists on a server sitting in our demo lab. And this happens to be through HTML5. So this calculator I now have, and I can move it around and use it as if it's a calculator that's sitting on my local desktop. If I was to do that same thing and do that through one of the other options, if I went into for example, if I went into the native proxy, and let's use File Explorer as an example. So I'm going to use the native proxy, which is going to call the client, which is the RDP client in this case. And it's going to give me an experience that's effectively no different than what I'd see on my desktop. This is actually the session. I could map all the local drives, my local drives on my current machine, with the drives that are mapped out to out here to the server, and all the files, etc. And I can drag and drop and do all of those things based on permissions, by the way. It's still going to require the right permissions to be able to do that. But from an end user's perspective, it makes it very simple and easy to be able to manage files and move files around. But this is done through RDP app. And this is an individual application that's published with only this functionality available. So it makes it so that you can publish a resource to an end user for an individual application to any device that they have. For example, we can do the same thing through HTML5, and I can have the same experience on an iPad or on another kind of device, a Google Chromebook or something like that, where I get the same experience, but I don't have to have a client on my local machine. So I can still do things like, drag and drop files and do whatever else I wanted to do to be able to bring things around. I would have that capability here as well. So it gives you a lot of power and a lot of capability to be able to publish just the resources that you want to publish without having to go through and create access to an entire network or to a desktop or something like that. It really gives you a lot more control, and in situations where you don't have control over that remote device, it gives you strong capabilities. And this works across all different types of devices. So it gives you a lot of capabilities that you may not have today in your security infrastructure. So let me talk a little bit about legacy applications. One of the challenges for most organizations is legacy applications, the kinds of applications that were developed for organizations' main business processes, et cetera, don't conform to most of the security requirements that organizations need to have today. For example, a lot of legacy applications aren't capable of adding multi-factor authentication. Trying to reprogram some of those applications is very difficult because maybe the programmers aren't around anymore. It's a application that's been around a long time. It's written in something like COBOL or who knows what. And so those applications don't always work with the existing infrastructure. And most security products today, unfortunately, don't work with those. They like to work with the new modern web applications. But Total Access Control is really designed to work with all of those applications, including legacy applications. Because Total Access Control sits between the end user as a reverse proxy and the application itself, Total Access Control has the capability to interject things like multi-factor authentication, device validation, all kinds of checks about the context of access of that user along with their credentials and provide access to those legacy applications. Things like, in this case, I'm going to use WordPress as an example. We're going to go into WordPress here. These are dummy credentials that TAC is putting in for this legacy application that we're looking at, and it brings up a page that brings me into my legacy application. In this case, I'm using WordPress as an example of what might be a legacy application. And most organizations have some of these, especially larger organizations where they're critical to the business of the organization. But without being able to put that into your existing security infrastructure, you're always going to have some vulnerabilities. Providing access to those resources usually requires somebody getting access to the network to then get access to that, whether it's local or through a VPN, where you're trying to get access to that application remotely and opening up a hole into your network from a security perspective that other organizations, other people, hackers, et cetera, could get access to. And so what Total Access Control does, it allows you to be able to go into those legacy applications, provide the security that you need, and still get access. And it also gives you the capability to look at the potential of moving some of those legacy applications. Some of our customers have taken those legacy applications, and because they could now encapsulate that and move that to a cloud environment, they might be able to do something like move it off of a legacy mainframe system or something along those lines and put it in the cloud where it's a lot more cost effective for the organization rather than being in their existing data center. So the ability to publish legacy applications along with your cloud applications, your local applications, web-based, client server, et cetera, all of those applications can be published in a single place, including legacy applications. So let's move on to a more current topic, Internet of Things and SSH. One of the things that organizations have are challenges with being able to publish and control access to things like that require protocols like SSH, for example. So within Total Access Control, we have the capability to go into SSH. So I'm going to go into a Linux box here through SSH, and it's going to single sign me on into this Linux device. Even though I'm on a Windows computer, it's signing me on, and I'm live in this interface, and I can interact as I choose with this infrastructure. It can also bring up, for example, if I wanted to use PuTTY to be able to get access to that, it could load the PuTTY client if it had it on my machine. It could load that PuTTY client and then create the connection, do the single sign-on to this SSH interface. This could be an interface to a router. It could be to a number of different devices that you may have within your security infrastructure. But the difference here is you're not providing access to the entire network and then saying, go ahead and get access to whatever that is. You're providing access to just this resource. And when you go to exit from the resource and you leave that resource, what's going to happen is it's going to log you out, and you're going to be gone out of that resource and back to the menu, not just sitting on the network left out there. So for people who have special access, admin access, et cetera, you're still able to provide them just the access to the resources that they should get access to. This may come into account for things like third-party vendors as well. So let's say that you had a third-party vendor who is looking at security cameras. So in this case, we're going to go in and we're going to use an RDP connection, in this case, to get access to some security cameras that we have set up. And so this is going to go through and it's going to load for, let's say I'm a contractor who needs to monitor a number of different security cameras that I have. So it's going to load up this application and I'm going to take a look at this. And from here, I'm going to double click in here and it's going to bring me into a live view of the cameras that I have set up. And you'll be able to see that here. Let me just open up the cameras. And I'll bring up a couple. And as you can see, looking at these cameras, there's a live view of these cameras while I'm connected automatically. So this is looking at the street. This is live right now and going through. But I was able to do this as a user who had to qualify to a number of different levels. And then the thing that I got access to was this camera. So I could limit it to just that if I was a third-party security contractor, or if this was something like a router or other devices. All of those could be restricted so that maybe the person who has to manage the air conditioning system for the organization, for the buildings, et cetera, you could set this up so that they can only get access to that. One of the biggest challenges from a security perspective, and we've all heard about some of those vulnerabilities that have happened, was through a third-party interface where they got access to an entire network and somebody took over their machine, hacked into their company, which then allowed them to get access to another company's infrastructure where they were able to go out and get more information. This stops that from happening. It only allows them to be captive within these resources. So even if that person got hacked, they would only be able to get access to this if they were able to meet all the qualifications. And that could include things like multi-factor authentication, out-of-band different levels of authentication, device validation, GeoIP intelligence, things like that that you can put on the policies before somebody could get access to anything like this. So it makes it very straightforward and simple to be able to publish things like SSH or IoT devices where you need to get access from a third party. So those kinds of access can be done through total access control, along with everything else that we're talking about, all of your other applications. So let's talk a little bit more about third-party access. This is an area that TAC really shines, and many organizations have a strong need for these kinds of access. So whether it's a third party of some sort, whether it's a contractor, whether it's a partner or even a customer, that you want to provide access to resources in your organization, total access control can do that, and they can do it very, very securely. So when I'm looking at the portal here, I'm going to sign in with a different user's credentials on here. I'm going to sign in, and this is a third party, and it's going to do push notification, as I had mentioned before. So the push notification in this case, I'm not going to save that, but the push notification is going to be sent out. And once I've put the push notification in, I get access to my portal. And that could be any multi-factor authentication that you wanted to use, including things like device validation and more, but we'll talk more about that in another segment. This basically was to the same exact portal. It was to the demo TAC gateway, the demo lab that we have, the same URL that I used in all of my other demonstrations, but this one is specifically to a third party with a different set of credentials, and they only get access, in this case, to these two different things. So in this case, it gets access to things like the IoT cameras, which I can go in, connect to those cameras through an RDP connection, and now the only thing that I'm going to get access to is the interface to those specific cameras. And while that's loading up here, I'll just let that finish here. While that's loading up, we can also talk about this could go into an SSH into Linux or into a router or anything else. So as I'm going into the camera and I'm clicking on the live view here, I'll be able to bring up the cameras, look at the different cameras here. And in this case, I'm going to bring up these cameras, and you can see live pictures from that camera of, in this case, traffic going by on the first camera there. This gives your vendors, your third-party vendors, the chance to come in and be able to get access, but only to the resources that they qualify for. That's all they get access to. And even in this case, where it's the same portal that I was using for all of the other demonstrations, that user only gets access to these very specific resources. And you can limit that to whatever resources that you choose. So whether that's to this kind of a portal with cameras, or whether it's to air conditioning systems, whether it's to other kinds of IoT devices on a manufacturing floor, et cetera, whether it's to a router or a Linux interface, any of those are possible and restricted just to those resources. And the user is captive within those resources. They can't get out. If they do try to get out of the resource, it brings them right back to the portal. So give you a secure way to publish resources to third parties and manage those very tightly, so you don't have to expose the network through something like a VPN, et cetera. So that's the way that we can handle third-party access through total access control. So now I want to talk a little bit about user device management. Total access control has a number of different things we can do around user and their devices, and I'll give you some examples of that here. So I'm just going to go into the configuration, which is going to bring up the portal for doing the configuration. I'm going to go into user and device management. So within user and device management, I have the capabilities to take a look at the users by their groups. In this case, it happens to be Active Directory, but I can manage users, et cetera, if I want to take a look at the users. If I wanted to go into their Active Directory and pick individual users, I could look at the user that I've been using here, and I can pull up all of their attributes. And I can also look at things like the devices that user has that are capable within that, that are assigned to that account. I can actually go through and link a user's device to their credentials. So in some ways, this gives you the capability to do things like passwordless authentication, where you could tie a device to an individual user, and those two together become the authentication. It doesn't negate a lot of the other things that we would do around context of access, which is also going to happen in the background, but it gives you the capability to strengthen and make sure that that user is who they say they are by making sure that the device is also accompanying the credentials that they put in. Many of our customers use username and password, then they use multi-factor authentication, and then for sensitive applications, they may use device validation. So for somebody like an administrator or for somebody who needs to get access to very sensitive information, you could have device validation be part of that as well. And when you look at this, you could look at the individual devices. In this case, it happens to be an iPhone 11. I can look at the phone that was approved. It has push notifications that's assigned to it. And it shows who that's actually logged to with all of this information that's available. And this information is recorded every time I try to sign in with whatever device that I choose to sign in. And this would also incorporate for the number of different types of devices if I had those. But I can actually bind that, and I can do something, some additional information like the capability to wipe an individual device. Now, you can either do an entire wipe of a device, which is, catastrophic from some perspectives, especially if it's a user-owned device, or you can do what we have as a partial wipe, which will only wipe out select information, things like the emails, contacts, tasks, calendar information, etc. So you can do a partial wipe of that device if you choose to do that, and it will give you an acknowledgement once that's been done. So with that capability, it gives you some really good focus for being able to control what's happening with that device and if that device happens to be lost. The other thing I can do is I can actually go through, if that particular device was lost, I could go through and just block that device. And that device is now blocked. It's gone. It's not going to be able to get access in the future. However, if that device, if I wanted to be able to go through, I could approve that device as an administrator, and now that device is available again to be able to be used for accessing the resources. This becomes particularly important if somebody loses one single device. So let's say that they lost their phone, but they didn't lose their laptop, they didn't lose their iPad or whatever. You don't have to block those other devices. You don't have to block the entire account. You can if you choose to, but you don't need to block the entire account. You can just block access from that particular device. And so it gives you a lot of capabilities to be able to refine what you're doing around those devices and make it so that your security policies really work the way that you want it with the organization and give you a lot stronger security. It also will work as an overlay for other products. For example, this has some level of MDM functionality, but there are certain things within maybe an MDM solution that you really like billing management or location management or things like that. TAC will still work with that MDM solution in concert with that as a security overlay that will work with that existing solution that you may already have in place. Or it could be a replacement depending on what your needs are and the security requirements that you have. So it also has the capability to do things like jailbreak detection, where you could look at an iPhone or a rooted Android or something like that, and that becomes available to either block a device or to be able to be something that can be partially blocked, the information about that, the applications that you can get access to, or even the functions in that application could be restricted based on the fact that that device is in a jailbroken status. So you may want to access or allow access to some resources, but not others. All that can be managed through this interface in a very simple, easy to use process. Let's look at reporting and auditing. One of the big benefits of total access control is that the more resources that you have, once you have all of your resources, et cetera, in one place, the better the reporting and the auditing capabilities are for your organization. If you have everything going through total access control, providing that zero trust solution, segmenting your resources, et cetera, you also get the benefit of having full reporting and audit capabilities across the entire organization, whether it's local or cloud. So now you can actually get a single place that will do reporting on who got access to what across your entire organization. So let's take a look. So when you go in here under the tools, so I'm going to go in and take a look at, I'm going to look first at the event viewer. So the event viewer is going to show me in great detail everything that's going on in my organization. So all the access that's happening, and it's going to give me the capability to slice and dice this in a lot of different ways. So everything that's happening through my gateway is available here. So if I wanted to look at something that says, I wanted to take a look at things like system events, let's say that we want to audit, I want to go through and take a look, and I want to see on failed, anything that's been failing. And so if I load that, it's going to bring up all of the failed events that have happened so that I can take a closer look at those events. So in this case, this was a failed authentication that happened. So if I bring this up, it's going to give me all the detail about that particular event and what happened along the way. Basically, the push notification failed. So when the push notification came to the device, either I didn't type it in or whoever this was, I think this was probably during the demo lab, didn't actually get processed correctly. So all of that information along with the device, the situation of the device, et cetera, the security disposition of that device, all of that is actually kept right here. And you can copy that to the clipboard. You can do whatever you want with that information. You also have the capability to go through on each of these different columns. You can bring up all the information and create Boolean logic to filter and sort on any of these different columns. So if I wanted to follow an individual user, for example, and I wanted to go in and take a look at who the user was on any particular site, I could go in and look at, say, I wanted to see everything to do with just this user, and this is still everything that failed for this user. I can now go through and have this all sorted by that individual user. So all of that information is available to me here, and I can take a quick look at this. So from an audit perspective, you have capability to look at all kinds of information, slice and dice it in any way that you want, and be able to get access to that rich information right off the bat. So that provides a lot of detail about what's going on in your environment. At the same time, from a reporting perspective, I can go back to the menu and I can take a look at other tools, and in this case, I'm going to look at the reports. So from the reports capability, there are a number of different reports that I could bring up. For example, let's take a look at the top applications. So there are a number of reports that you can create, graphical reports as well as others. This is just one example of a graphical report that will show you what are the top applications that are coming in by the number of times that they've been hit, the number of times they've transferred data, how much data they've transferred across, et cetera. But there are a number of different applications that you can have available or that you can create, and they will bring the information to you the way that you want to see that. So one more thing that I'll show you here is under the session monitor. If I take a look at the session monitor itself, I'm going to take a look at what's going on right now in my gateway. And right now, the only person that's signed in is me into this lab, but I'm going to bring this up and it's going to show me very explicit details about me, about my device, about what's happening and all of the details. So under here, under the client tab, this is everything that I have. And I've got Norton 360 for an antivirus. The firewall is enabled. All this information, this rich information about this particular session is all available to me and can also be used in the policy engines that we talked about before. I can also look at the applications. If I click on the applications tab, I can see the applications first that I have access to, potentially. I can see which applications I've actually started in this session. And I can also see which applications are still active at this moment in time. So we can actually see what's happening within a user at this moment in time and be able to see what's happening along with all the details about that. So if I wanted to take a look at that, all of that information is available real time so that I can see what a user is doing at any particular point. So that's one of the benefits of having total access control, is whether this is a cloud-based application, whether it's a local-based application, legacy application, et cetera. I can see who's accessing it, who did get access to it, and be able to look at how many users are actually using applications at any given time. In fact, we had one of our customers use this as a licensing tool to work with their vendor about how many users were actually using that particular application, because now they have proof of how many users are using a particular application. In this case, they were able to save quite a bit of money because the vendor had said, look, you can't tell us how many people are using or aren't using that application, so you have to license everybody for it. In this case, they were able to go back and said, well, only half our users were using that particular application, and so we now have proof. But that's just one of the side benefits that you look at when you have access to all of that rich information through the audit and reporting tools that Total Access Control has. So that's an overview of Total Access Control. In summary, Total Access Control is a secure reverse proxy that helps you in your migration from your existing infrastructure to a zero trust architecture. It helps you to segment your resources, only provide access to resources that users are qualified to access under their existing circumstances or their existing context of access. So it gives you a lot more granularity and a lot more security controls for each end user. But at the same time, it makes it easier for the end user to be able to get access with the capabilities of single sign-on and a consistent portal experience that they have regardless of the device that they happen to use or where they're getting access from. From a security perspective, behind the scenes, everything that's happening is taking into account that context of access and your security policies for each and every resource in your organization. So whether it's a cloud-based resource, whether it's a local-based resource, whether it's SSH, IoT, legacy application, whether it's a VDI infrastructure, whatever it happens to be, or client-server application, all of those resources can be in one central place where you can manage. And that gives you the capability to now report and audit on everything that's happening in your entire organization in one place. So it allows you to be able to prepare for the future, move to a more modern infrastructure with a lot more security controls, and do it at the same time as making the whole experience easier for your organization and for your end users. This is the easiest path to zero trust, and Total Access Control will help you get there.